What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Miles Sanders versus Kenyan Drake. This is a decision that a ton of you are going to need to make. These guys are going right next to each other in drafts, and they're both players that we've talked about loving this season, not only from a floor perspective, but both of these guys have top 5 ceilings. Going into this video, I had them ranked 10th and 11th overall, but depending on the site, you can get them anywhere from the late first round to the late second round and even into the third round at times. So we're going to be doing a deep dive into both of these players and see who I recommend drafting first. Before we start though, gotta do the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which player led the league in fumbles last season. The answer was Daniel Jones with 11. Absolutely crazy. Dude needs to hang on to the football. Person who got that right first was Dawson Pidgeot. Today's stat, which running back with at least 120 carries ranked with the lowest yards created? So let's start this breakdown. First, I want to go over some similarities between these two running backs. So both were being taken in roughly the middle rounds of drafts last season, and both started off slow. So Miles Sanders averaged just 26 snaps per game through the first 9 weeks last season, and just for reference, Jordan Howard was averaging 31. And Sanders was only scoring 9.5 fantasy points per game during that stretch, so it wasn't that great. Drake was averaging just 35 snaps per game through the Dolphins, or on the Dolphins, through the first 6 weeks, while scoring just 7.3 fantasy points per game. So for roughly the first half season on both these guys, they were underperforming, but we knew the talent was there. And so they were players we wanted you guys to trade for aggressively because, again, they're talented and they had upside in the receiving game. So we knew if they were given the chance, they were going to crush. And especially with the trade news surrounding Drake, he was a guy you should have been trading for. And then what happened in the second half, they both exploded from weeks 11 through 16. So after the Eagles bye and before his week 17 ankle injury, Sanders jumped up to 58 snaps per game, averaging 16.7 fantasy points per game. And then from week 9 on, so as a member of the Cardinals after being traded, Drake jumped up to 50.6 snaps per game, averaging 17.9 fantasy points per game. And now we jump to the offseason and we see Jordan Howard leaving for agency while David Johnson gets traded away. Then we look at the draft. Well, the Cardinals only spent a 7th round pick on Eno Benjamin, and the Eagles did nothing to address competition in the backfield. So it's pretty clear that these guys should be going as early as they are. Both of them crushed down the stretch, and then both of their teams have shown in free agency, in the trade market, in the draft, that they're invested in these running backs. And we should basically expect both of them to be featured backs. So who do you draft? Let's start off with the industry projections. So I've compiled projections from a few different sources that I trust, and this is a fairly universal win for Miles Sanders. He consistently outpaces Drake by about 20 carries and 10 receptions with about 1 more total touchdown, averaging about 30 more fantasy points. And again, this isn't like, well, Sanders wins some, Drake wins some, and it just kind of bounces out. It's pretty consistent that Sanders is projected on average to score more fantasy points. And the main reason is the backups and the pace. Sites are projecting Eno Benjamin and Chase Edmonds for around 150 to 170 combined touches this season, while the only real backup on the Eagles is Boston Scott, and he's only looking for roughly 100 touches, maybe that 90 to 110 range. And since there's no real third backup taking touches, there's less competition for Miles Sanders. But that shouldn't really shock us, right? I mean, the Cardinals had 3 different featured backs last season, with all of David Johnson, Chase Edmonds, and Drake all being the guy at some point. And while most of that was due to injuries, it shows that they're okay leaning on different running backs when it's working. And given that Edmonds was really good last season when he was given the chance, it's not like they're going to completely abandon him. And the second part was the pace. Like I mentioned, we know that the Eagles love to play fast. Since 2014, the Eagles have ranked first, second, fourth, third, ninth, and first in plays per game. And it's fairly obvious that more plays equals more potential carries and receptions, which is great for fantasy, right? I mean, if you've got a team having 70 plays per game and you own 30% of the share of the touches, that's better than owning 30% of the touches on a team with 50 plays per game, right? Makes sense. Now, we thought the Cardinals were going to play fast last season, and we were right initially. They were first in no huddle rate and seconds per snap, while ranking second in plays per game through the first month. After the first month, though, they played much slower, ultimately finishing 21st in plays per game. Now, it's tough to truly know what they want this year, but it's worth noting that when they were playing super fast for that first month, they were 0-3-1. After that point, they were 5-7, with a lot of those 7 losses being in very competitive games and a few being against really good teams. So right now, it's not looking great for Drake in this battle, right? I had him ranked one spot lower. The industry projections do favor Sanders, mainly because of their offense, the total volume, I guess, of the offense and the respective shares they have in those offenses. But what about safety? At the end of the day, both of these guys could get like 1,700 yards, 15 touchdowns, and they honestly have these identical ceilings, but we want to avoid risk in the first 4 rounds, so it was one of them riskier. Unfortunately for Drake, Sanders wins here as well. According to my risk grades, Sanders is the 3rd safest running back pick behind Zeke and Christian McCaffrey, whereas Drake ranks 23rd. So starting with Sanders, there's just no category where he gets much of a downgrade. He was a 2nd round pick. That's pretty good. Like I said, the volume on the offense is going to be there. It's a good offense overall, so the touchdowns will be there. He has no real volume risk. He handled a lot of touches in college. He had a 229 touch season as a rookie at age 22. He's only had the one injury, and he didn't even miss any games. Like, he left week 17 early, but then he played through the injury in the playoff game, and now he's just turning 23. I believe he just turned 23. So if there's something risky you can find with Miles Sanders, let me know, but I can't knock him in any of those categories, so he's very safe. As for Drake, it's not that he just like tanks in one specific category. It's just that he's slightly more risky in all of them. He was a 3rd round pick. The Cardinals are expected to run slightly fewer plays. We do expect them to score slightly fewer points. He does have a little bit more volume risk, having Eno and Edmonds. His max touches in college was only 106. You know, it took him until his age 25 season to have almost as many touches as Sanders did at age 22. So I definitely don't want you to think Drake is this huge risk of busting, can't possibly draft him with all these concerns, right? These are not massive concerns, and I still like him a lot. You know, some of these are honestly ticky-tack, but I bring it up because not only does Sanders have a higher average projection and the same ceiling, but he's safer. And there are now a lot of things pointing to Sanders winning this battle. I do want to give the top case for Drake over Sanders because I don't want you to think this is some just slam dunk that Sanders, he is going to win this battle, but I don't want you to think that just 100 times out of 100, Sanders is going to score more points, because there's absolutely a chance that Drake just crushes this season and finishes as a top 3 running back. So I want to lay that path out for you. I expect the Eagles to score more than the Cardinals on average, but we need to remember that Kyler Murray was a rookie last season, throwing to Kirk and Fitz, but then also Damiere Byrd, Keyshawn Johnson, and Pharoh Cooper. Right, a ton of those targets are now going to DeAndre Hopkins, who's quite possibly the best wide receiver in football, but is easily top 3. So there's definitely a chance that the Cardinals end up as, say, a top 7 offense this season, given that they're got a lot of weapons, and this will be Kyler Murray's second season. And given that Drake was on pace for 16 touchdowns on the Cardinals last year, it's not crazy to think that he could score between 15 and 20. Now, that's on the high end of variance, but it's absolutely possible. And people knock him because he was only good for 8 weeks. He never really broke out before that in his career. But that's not entirely true. I mean, Drake has 20 career games now with at least 10 carries, and his 16-week pace in those games is 1,563 yards and 10.5 touchdowns for 244 fantasy points, which is exactly what Sanders is projected for. And that's only counting games with at least 10 carries. And 12 of those games were as a member of the Dolphins. So it's not a stretch to think that we could see those numbers go up on the Cardinals this season, given that we expect more than 10 carries per game, and the Cardinals are better than the Dolphins, so more touchdowns overall. Ultimately, though, Sanders is who I'm picking if I need to make the choice, and I actually did need to make the choice in the Scott Fish Bowl. I took Zeke with my first pick, and then I had the choice between Drake and Sanders in the second round, and ultimately I do think that I made the right call picking Sanders. So that's a breakdown between the two players. If there's someone else that you really want me to break down, like two players going right next to each other, preferably same position, but we can cross over positions, let me know in the comment section down below. That's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.